The Texas sun, usually a benevolent golden presence, felt like a heavy shroud on the day they buried Jedediah. A profound, almost reverent quiet had fallen over the small, dusty cemetery in Bandera, the cowboy capital of the world. Grief, raw and palpable, clung to the humid air, thick with the scent of cedar and damp earth. Jedediah, a man woven into this land's fabric as the gnarled oak trees, was undeniably gone. His family, a tight-knit cluster of stoic faces and tear-reddened eyes, stood closest to the yawning maw of the open grave, shoulders slumped beneath immeasurable loss. Each clod of turned dirt echoed the moment's finality, a stark reminder of life's fragile grip. A low, uneasy murmur rippled through the hundreds of mourners as the casket, a simple pine box too small to contain Jedediah's vast, untamed spirit, was carefully lowered. Just as the ropes began their slow, creaking descent, the impossible happened, shattering the somber stillness. From the edge of the crowd, where the ranch horses were tethered, a sudden, powerful surge erupted. Jedediah's beloved Mustang, Thunder, a magnificent creature with a coat the color of storm clouds and eyes holding the untamed wildness of the frontier, broke free from its handler with an explosive burst of energy. The horse, usually calm and obedient, became a raw force of nature, pushing through bewildered onlookers with unsettling intensity, its powerful hooves thudding deliberately on the hallowed grass. A collective, sharp gasp escaped the crowd as Thunder, ignoring frantic calls, navigated directly to the graveside. It didn't pause, didn't hesitate. With a surprising grace that belied its raw power, the Mustang planted itself firmly beside Jedediah's coffin, its massive head lowering with mournful reverence. Then, with almost human tenderness, it began to nudge the heavy wooden box, gently at first, then with persistent, insistent pressure, as if desperately trying to wake its master. Attempts to lead it away were met with stubborn, unyielding resistance, a powerful shake of its proud head, and a defiant snort that warned anyone against further interference. Thunder was not moving, a living, breathing sentinel. Jedediah's niece, Sarah, stood utterly transfixed, her profound grief momentarily eclipsed by the bewildering and unsettling spectacle. She had loved her uncle fiercely and knew the almost mystical bond he shared with Thunder was unlike any other. But this was beyond mere animal instinct, beyond the simple sorrow of a loyal companion. As the horse continued its mournful, insistent nudging, Sarah found herself meeting its dark, intelligent gaze. In Thunder's deep-set eyes, usually full of gentle understanding, she caught a glint, sharp and almost accusatory. It wasn't just defiance, it was a silent protest, a profound challenge flung into the face of their collective sorrow and the finality of death. This was a communication deeply personal and urgent. A silent language only Jedediah would have understood now made a public spectacle for Bandera to witness. The unexpected and unprecedented display brought the solemn proceedings to a complete halt. Concerned murmurs spread through the community. No one had ever seen anything quite like it. Horses grieved, yes, but not with such unwavering, desperate conviction. Not with this kind of insistent, unyielding presence. Sarah felt a sudden, icy chill, a premonition. Thunder's behavior wasn't just grief. It was, she instinctively knew, a message. A desperate, unspoken challenge that something was profoundly wrong, something that transcended death itself, demanding their attention. The scene left everyone questioning the horse's unprecedented actions, its unshakable vigil, Was it simply an animal's profound sorrow? Or was there something far more significant? A hidden truth lurking beneath the surface of Jedediah's quiet, enigmatic life. The very air vibrated with unspoken questions, with the heavy weight of an untold story struggling desperately to break free. Justice, it seemed, had a wild heart and a silent voice, speaking through the loyal spirit of a Mustang. Thunder stood sentinel, a living monument of unwavering loyalty and fierce defiance, its gaze fixed steadfastly on the coffin, unwavering, leaving the grieving family and the entire community of Bandera in a state of profound suspense and unsettling confusion. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. From that chilling scene at the graveside, where a wild heart defied human grief, we must now journey back in time, back to the dusty heart of Bandera, Texas, the undisputed cowboy capital of the world. To truly comprehend the raw, untamed emotion that pulsed through Thunder that day, we need to understand the man he mourned and the land that shaped them both. Bandera isn't just a dot on a map. It's a living, breathing testament to a bygone era, stubbornly clinging to its heritage. Its main street, worn smooth by generations of boots and hooves, still whispers tales of legendary cowboys and fierce independence. Here, the air itself seems to hum with the ghosts of cattle drives and frontier spirit. Honky-tonk music, a soulful blend of joy and melancholy, spills from the open doors of saloons, mingling with the scent of mesquite smoke and sun-baked earth. Beyond the town's charming facade, the vast Texas landscape stretches out. An endless canvas of rolling hills, blanketed in ancient oak trees, their gnarled branches reaching towards a sky that often feels bigger than anywhere else on earth. This was Jedediah's world, the very fabric of his existence. He was not merely a resident, he was an extension of this untamed beauty, his soul as deeply rooted as the oldest live oak on his sprawling ranch. Jedediah's life was a rhythm set by the land, a quiet symphony of duty and dedication. He rose with the sun, his silhouette a familiar sight against the dawn sky, a steaming mug of coffee in hand as he surveyed his domain. His days were a meticulous dance of tending to his cattle, mending fences, and coaxing life from the stubborn soil. He possessed a profound, almost spiritual connection to the natural world, observing the subtle shifts in weather, the flight of a hawk, the rustle of wind through the tall grasses. These weren't just observations, they were conversations, a silent dialogue with the very essence of Bandera. He understood its rhythms, its demands, and its magic in a way few others did. His roots ran deep, tracing back through generations of ranchers who had carved a life from this rugged terrain. The Jedediah name was synonymous with hard work, integrity, and fierce, unyielding independence. Yet this independence was balanced by an equally strong sense of community. The local customs were his customs, the boisterous Saturday night gatherings, the adrenaline-fueled rodeos that drew crowds from miles around, and the unwritten code of honor that bound cowboys together. He was a man of few words, often found listening more than speaking, his weathered face a canvas of unspoken thoughts. This quiet demeanor, while respected, sometimes led to him being misunderstood, his deep convictions mistaken for stubbornness. Beneath his stoic exterior lay a quiet burden, a profound sense of responsibility for his land and his people. He carried the weight of preserving not just his ranch, but the very soul of Bandera. His dreams weren't of grand wealth or fleeting fame. They were far more fundamental. He yearned to protect the integrity of the cowboy way of life, to ensure that the traditions, the respect for the land, and the honest toil that defined his ancestors would endure. He saw the encroaching shadows of modernity, the subtle shifts in values, and felt a growing unease. This was a man who understood the fragility of tradition and the immense effort required to keep it alive. It was this deep-seated spirit, this untamed heart, that found its mirror in Thunder. The Mustang wasn't just bought, it was earned. Jedediah had spent weeks, patient and unwavering, following the wild herd, observing the magnificent stallion. The taming of Thunder wasn't about breaking a spirit, but about forging a connection, a mutual respect between two wild souls. It was a testament to Jedediah's unique ability to communicate beyond words, to understand the raw language of nature. He spoke to Thunder with his hands, his eyes, his very presence, and the horse responded with an unwavering loyalty that transcended the typical owner-animal relationship. Their bond became legendary in Bandera, a silent pact understood by all who witnessed it. Thunder was more than a horse, it was Jedediah's confidant, his shadow, privy to his deepest thoughts and unspoken secrets. On long rides across the vast plains under the immense Texas sky, Jedediah would often confide in the Mustang, sharing his worries about the changing times, his hopes for Bandera, and the quiet struggles he faced. Thunder would listen, its ears swiveling, its powerful frame a silent, comforting presence. There was an almost telepathic understanding between them, a bond forged in shared solitude and mutual respect. This profound connection between Jedediah, Thunder, and the very spirit of Bandera, the cowboy capital of the world, set the emotional stage for everything that was to unfold. It was a bond that would, in the end, refuse to be silenced by death itself. Jedediah, despite his unwavering resolve and deep roots in Bandera, was not immune to the subtle currents of change that began to ripple through his beloved community. His quiet strength, often mistaken for simplicity, masked a profound sensitivity to the world around him. He felt the shifting sands of time, not as a sudden tremor, but as a slow, insidious erosion, chipping away at the bedrock of values he held so dear. These weren't grand, dramatic confrontations that left scars visible for all to see, but rather persistent, low-level slights and betrayals, accumulating like dust in the corners of an old, cherished home. Each instance, small in isolation, contributed to a growing disconnect, a quiet disappointment that settled deep within his stoic heart. He remembered the promises, whispered like the rustle of dry leaves in the wind, from local officials who spoke eloquently of preserving Bandera's pristine ranch lands. Yet, year after year, those promises remained unfulfilled, replaced by zoning variances and permits for developments that crept ever closer to the wild heart of the countryside. Jedediah would attend the town hall meetings, a silent sentinel in the back row, listening to the rhetoric, feeling the hollow ring of words that never translated into action. His gaze, usually so clear and steady, would cloud with a weariness that few truly noticed, a burden of foresight and disappointment he carried alone. He saw the beauty of the land being slowly commodified, its ancient oaks giving way to manicured lawns, and a silent resentment began to fester. Then there were the veiled criticisms from neighbors, once allies in the shared struggle of ranch life, now subtly influenced by the siren call of progress. They spoke of his old-fashioned ways with a patronizing chuckle, suggesting he was resistant to change, out of touch with modern realities. His family, too, sometimes dismissed his concerns about the future of Bandera, seeing them as the anxieties of an aging man rather than the profound wisdom of someone intimately connected to the land. He'd hear snippets of conversations, hushed tones about his stubbornness, his inability to adapt, and each word was a tiny splinter, embedding itself deeper into his spirit. He never retaliated, never argued, choosing instead to internalize the pain, letting it settle into the quiet corners of his soul. A heavy cloak he wore with dignity. Jedediah also endured moments of subtle manipulation, where he was pressured to compromise his values for what others deemed progress. Investors, smooth-talking and impeccably dressed, would visit his ranch, offering generous sums for parcels of land, hinting at the collective benefit to the community if he would just see reason. They spoke of job creation and economic growth, painting a picture of a prosperous Bandera that, to Jedediah, felt utterly alien and devoid of soul. He understood the allure, the temptation, but he also saw the hidden costs, the irreparable damage to a way of life that was more precious than any monetary gain. He would politely decline, his resolve unshaken. But the encounters left a bitter aftertaste, a sense of being an outsider in his own home, constantly defending the very essence of who he was. He witnessed injustice too, the exploitation of the land and its people, often in ways that were just shy of illegal, making immediate action feel impossible. The quiet struggles of smaller ranchers, squeezed out by larger operations, the subtle poisoning of streams by runoff from new developments that somehow slipped past regulations. These were wounds Jedediah saw forming, festering beneath the surface of Bandera's idyllic facade. He felt a profound powerlessness, a burning desire to protect what was vulnerable, yet knowing that speaking out without irrefutable proof could brand him as a crazy old man, further marginalizing his voice. This quiet resentment, this inability to immediately right the wrongs he perceived, became another heavy stone in his already burdened heart, deepening his resolve to find a way, any way, to make things right. The community's gradual, almost imperceptible shift towards modern development, often at odds with Jedediah's deeply ingrained traditional values, created a silent rift. It wasn't a chasm of open hostility, but a widening gap of understanding, a quiet alienation that separated him from many he had once considered kin. His stoic nature, his refusal to openly complain or lash out, meant that these emotional blows were absorbed internally, hardening his resolve while slowly eroding his spirit. He became a silent observer, a guardian of a fading era, watching as the soul of Bandera slowly changed piece by piece. The audience must understand that Jedediah's eventual, profound sacrifice was not a sudden, impulsive act born of a single moment of crisis. No, it was the culmination of years, decades even, of witnessing and enduring the slow degradation of everything he held dear. Every broken promise, every dismissive word, every subtle manipulation, and every quiet injustice had built up, layer upon painful layer, forging a quiet determination within him. His heart, though bruised and heavy, remained fiercely loyal to the true spirit of Bandera, a loyalty that would ultimately demand the highest price. This was the silent crucible in which his final, desperate plan was forged, a testament to a man who, though often unheard, understood the true cost of silence. The emotional atmosphere in Bandera, once a comforting blanket of shared tradition, now thickened with an almost palpable tension, mirroring the turmoil that churned within Jedediah. The subtle cracks he had observed in the community's foundation had widened, becoming chasms of misunderstanding and quiet conflict. A new, more insidious threat had begun to cast its long shadow over the rolling hills and winding rivers he held so dear. A formidable entity, Horizon Holdings, a development corporation with deep pockets and slick presentations, had set its sights on Bandera's pristine ranch lands. Their vision, cloaked in promises of prosperity and modernization, was a gaudy resort complex, a sprawling golf course, and exclusive residential estates. A future that would irrevocably drain the town's precious water resources, desecrate its historical heritage, and erase the very essence of its cowboy soul. Jedediah, isolated by his profound, almost primal understanding of the land and its delicate vulnerabilities, was among the first to grasp the true magnitude of the danger. He saw beyond the glossy brochures and the smiling corporate faces, perceiving the ecological devastation and cultural erosion that lay beneath their attractive facade. His quiet efforts to investigate, to warn others, began innocuously enough. He'd bring up concerns at town council meetings, his voice a low rumble against the rising tide of enthusiasm. He'd speak to old friends, trying to explain the long-term impact on the aquifers, the irreversible changes to the native ecosystem, but his warnings were consistently met with skepticism, indifference, or even passive resistance. Some dismissed him as an old man clinging to the past, unable to embrace progress. Others, swayed by Horizon Holdings' generous community benefit packages or the tantalizing prospect of selling their own less fertile plots, simply refused to listen. The social pressures intensified, pressing in on Jedediah from all sides. He faced quiet judgment from some neighbors who, dazzled by the corporation's promises, saw him as an unreasonable obstacle to Bandera's brighter, wealthier future. Even within his own family, there were veiled suggestions that he should move with the times, that his stubbornness was holding everyone back. A distant cousin, eager to sell a peripheral piece of land, once remarked, "Jedediah, you can't stop the river from flowing, can you? Progress is coming, whether we like it or not." The words, though seemingly innocuous, stung deeply, highlighting his growing isolation. Discussions within the community became strained, often devolving into hushed debates or uncomfortable silences when Jedediah was present. He found himself constantly on the defensive, struggling to articulate the full scope of the threat without revealing the sensitive information he was meticulously gathering. Details of Horizon Holdings' questionable environmental track record in other towns, their history of circumventing regulations, and the true devastating impact on water tables. To speak openly without irrefutable proof would risk branding him a paranoid agitator, undermining his credibility entirely and potentially jeopardizing his own safety as he delved deeper into their operations. The corporation's presence became increasingly palpable, their influence subtly spreading through the town like a slow-acting poison. They sponsored the annual rodeo, donated to the school, and even offered to revitalize the dusty main street, subtly buying loyalty and silencing dissent with carefully placed generosity. Jedediah experienced a profound emotional suffocation. The weight of Bandera's future, its very soul, felt squarely on his shoulders, yet he was increasingly misunderstood and tragically alone in his solitary fight. Sleepless nights were spent staring at the ceiling, the vast Texas sky offering no comfort, only an expanse of stars that seemed to mock his helplessness. He felt the burden of a secret war, fought not with bullets, but with silent observations and hidden anxieties. His once peaceful rides with Thunder became less about solace and more about reconnaissance, his gaze scanning the horizon not for beauty, but for signs of encroachment. Thunder, ever attuned to Jedediah's unspoken emotions, began to reflect his mounting stress and unspoken fears. The Mustang, usually a picture of calm strength, grew more agitated. Its ears would flick nervously at the distant rumble of construction machinery on a neighboring property, its powerful body tensing unexpectedly during their rides. The horse would often nuzzle Jedediah's hand with an insistent urgency, as if trying to draw out the gnawing dread that had taken root in his master's heart. Thunder became a silent barometer of the impending crisis, its wild instincts sensing the disruption to the natural order, the threat to their shared world. It was a shared burden, a silent understanding between man and beast, a testament to the deep, unbreakable bond that now served as Jedediah's only true alliance in a town that seemed to be turning against him. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that time was rapidly running out. The quiet determination forged in the crucible of years now sharpened into a singular, unwavering focus. Jedediah, no longer content to merely observe the slow decay of his beloved Bandera, became a phantom in the night, his weathered hands tracing the insidious lines of corruption that threatened to choke the very life out of his home. His days were still spent tending the ranch, a facade of normalcy, but his nights belonged to a desperate crusade, his silhouette often seen against the moonlit plains, Thunder's hooves barely disturbing the dust. He knew the enemy was subtle, their machinations hidden beneath layers of legal jargon and false promises. But Jedediah possessed a different kind of wisdom, one rooted in the land itself. A primal intuition that whispered of impending doom, urging him to delve deeper. It was during one such clandestine ride, guided by the familiar trails only he and Thunder knew, that the pieces finally coalesced into a horrifying mosaic. Deep within the ancient, forgotten corners of the ranch, where the old-timers whispered of sacred springs, Jedediah discovered not just evidence, but the very heart of the antagonist's malevolent design. Hidden geological surveys, illicit permits for toxic waste disposal disguised as agricultural development, and encrypted communications detailing a vast, interconnected web of illegal land grabs spanning generations of Bandera families. This wasn't just about a few acres. It was a systematic, calculated plan to poison the very lifeblood of the region, its pristine water, its fertile soil, its soul. The corporation, cloaked in respectability, intended to turn Bandera into a dumping ground, exploiting its remote beauty for profit, then abandoning it to a slow, agonizing death. The revelation hit Jedediah with the force of a Texas thunderclap, shaking him to his core, yet simultaneously clarifying his path. He clutched the damning documents, his knuckles white, the paper crinkling under the pressure of his grip. He understood now, with chilling certainty, that simply presenting this evidence would not be enough. The tentacles of corruption ran too deep, ensnaring local officials, perhaps even some he had once called friends. He couldn't trust the system to protect Bandera. He had to become the system, the last line of defense. A profound, silent decision settled in his heart, heavy as the weight of the world, yet strangely liberating. He would sacrifice everything, his peace, his reputation, perhaps even his life, to expose the truth and save his home. This wasn't a choice, it was a sacred duty, etched into his very being. His plan, born of desperation and a lifetime of hard-won wisdom, began to take shape, intricate and dangerous. He knew he couldn't confront them directly, they would crush him. Instead, he would orchestrate a posthumous revelation, a truth bomb detonated from beyond the grave. This involved a series of incredibly risky moves, meticulously documenting every detail, creating encrypted files, and devising a system of clues that only his most observant loved ones, perhaps Sarah, would eventually decipher. He spent countless hours poring over maps, cross-referencing names, and consolidating the evidence, often with Thunder standing sentinel nearby, a silent, knowing accomplice. The Mustang, sensing the gravity of Jedediah's mission, remained unusually still, its large, intelligent eyes often fixed on its master, as if understanding the immense burden he carried. Jedediah was laying the groundwork for a justice that would echo through Bandera long after he was gone. This was the moment Jedediah turned the key, shifting irrevocably from passive resistance to active, solitary engineering of Bandera's salvation. He moved with a renewed, almost feverish energy, yet his outward demeanor remained stoic, perhaps even more withdrawn. A man consumed by an unseen battle. The weight of his impending sacrifice was immense, a silent scream within his soul. But the vision of a protected Bandera propelled him forward. He began to subtly alter his routines, leaving behind small, seemingly innocuous items in specific places, planting seeds of curiosity for those who might one day seek answers. A worn, leather-bound journal, usually kept under lock and key, now rested in a slightly more visible spot, its pages filled with his cryptic observations and coded references, hinting at dates and locations. A particular saddlebag, always loaded for long rides, now contained a carefully folded, annotated map marked with symbols only he would understand. These were not random acts. They were breadcrumbs, a silent trail meant to be followed when the time was right. A final, desperate conversation with a family he deeply loved, but could not burden with his terrible secret, knowing they would eventually understand. He was preparing his own undoing, but in doing so, ensuring Bandera's future and preserving its wild, untamed heart. Jedediah's final days were a cruel paradox of intense activity and profound internal stillness. He moved through his ranch, a ghost among the living, executing his carefully laid plan with a grim determination that masked a maelstrom of fear and doubt. Each step taken, each piece of evidence secured, was a battle against the crushing weight of his secret mission. The solitude he had always cherished now felt like a suffocating shroud, amplifying the terror of what he was doing and the potential consequences. He knew the risks, not just to himself, but to his legacy, his family, and the very community he sought to protect. The burden was immense, a physical ache that settled deep in his bones, making every breath a conscious effort. His health, once robust and unwavering, began to show the strain. The late nights spent poring over documents, the clandestine meetings, the constant vigilance chipped away at his formidable constitution. He grew thinner, his eyes, usually sharp and clear like the Bandera sky, now held a haunted, faraway look. His family, particularly his niece Sarah, noticed the changes first. She saw the tremor in his hands when he thought no one was watching, the way he would suddenly stop mid-sentence, his gaze fixed on some unseen point in the distance, lost in thoughts he couldn't share. He became evasive, offering vague answers to simple questions about his whereabouts or his plans for the day. This preoccupation, so unlike the grounded, predictable Jedediah they knew, bred a quiet confusion, then a burgeoning concern within the household. There were subtle frictions. His sister, Martha, worried about his solitude, tried to coax him into town for community gatherings, only to be met with polite but firm refusals. "Got too much to do on the ranch, Martha," he'd say, his voice softer than usual, a hint of weariness in its tone. Sarah, with her keen observational skills, felt a deeper unease. She attempted to bridge the growing chasm between them, asking about his rides with Thunder, trying to engage him in conversations about the land he loved. But Jedediah, though never unkind, would gently push her away, his answers becoming increasingly terse, his focus elsewhere. It deepened the sense of mystery surrounding him, leaving Sarah with a knot of worry in her stomach that she couldn't quite articulate. Beyond the ranch, the whispers began to circulate. Some neighbors, recalling his steadfast character, expressed genuine concern. "Jedediah ain't himself," they'd murmur over coffee at the diner, attributing it to age or unspoken ailments. Others, however, influenced by the subtle smear campaign orchestrated by the antagonist's corporate interests, viewed his withdrawn nature with suspicion. He was getting eccentric, holding up progress, they'd say, their words laced with a judgment that cut Jedediah deeper than they could ever know. He felt the shift in their gazes, the subtle avoidance, the way conversations would halt when he approached. It was a new kind of loneliness, born not of choice, but of necessity. Through it all, Thunder remained his constant, unwavering companion. The Mustang, usually a vibrant, spirited creature, seemed to mirror Jedediah's distress. Its powerful frame carried a new kind of quietude. Its eyes, often reflecting Jedediah's own, now held a similar depth of sadness and watchfulness. When Jedediah was awake at all hours, Thunder would stand by the barn door, a silent sentinel. When Jedediah rode out under the cloak of darkness, Thunder moved with an almost supernatural stealth, its loyalty a tangible force against the encroaching despair. The horse was privy to the secrets a Jedediah could tell no human, a silent confidant absorbing the weight of his master's burden. The cultural dynamics of Bandera played a significant role in how these changes were perceived. There was a strong tendency towards respecting privacy, a cowboy's right to his own space and his own struggles. Yet beneath that veneer of respectful distance lay a powerful undercurrent of community, watchfulness, and gossip. Everyone knew everyone, and Jedediah's unusual behavior was a topic that simmered beneath the surface of polite conversation, occasionally bubbling over into speculation. He was aware of it, the quiet scrutiny, the unspoken questions, and it only reinforced his need for secrecy, for absolute discretion. The psychological impact on Jedediah was profound. He walked a lonely path, each day a step closer to an uncertain resolution, knowing the potential cost of his actions. He grappled with the morality of his choices, the fear of failure, the pain of isolating himself from those he loved. Yet beneath the fear and the isolation burned an unwavering sense of duty, a fierce, protective love for Bandera that superseded all personal considerations. He was a man driven by a purpose larger than himself, a quiet warrior preparing for a battle he knew he might not survive, but one he absolutely had to fight. His silence was not weakness, but the steel casing around an explosive truth ready to be unleashed. Thunder's steadfast refusal to leave Jedediah's coffin had etched itself into Sarah's very soul. The family, still reeling from Jedediah's sudden passing and his increasingly distant behavior in his final days, began to feel the weight of Thunder's silent protest. Sarah, Jedediah's sharp-minded niece, couldn't shake the feeling her uncle, a man of profound intention, had left them a puzzle to solve. His quiet strength, it all coalesced into a potent suspicion. Thunder, after the burial, would not return to its usual pasture. Instead, it lingered near the ranch house, often nudging Jedediah's old saddle, or standing by the worn leather armchair where he used to read. Its eyes, deep and knowing, seemed to implore Sarah to look closer. Sarah, driven by grief and intuition, began her search, revisiting Jedediah's study. Among his meticulously organized papers, she found a worn, leather-bound journal, its pages filled with his elegant script. It was a coded narrative of land observations. Thunder, outside the window, whinnied softly as Sarah traced a peculiar symbol on a final entry. This led her to a faded topographical map of Bandera, tucked beneath a loose floorboard. Jedediah had circled a remote section of his ranch, but it was the item Thunder guarded most fiercely that provided the final piece, a small, tarnished silver locket, usually worn by Jedediah, now buried beneath the horse's favorite sleeping spot in the barn. Inside, a micro SD card. The contents of the micro SD card, combined with the journal's decoded entries and the marked map, painted a devastating picture. Jedediah had meticulously documented the antagonist's corrupt scheme. A vast, fraudulent land deal involving illegal toxic waste dumping near Bandera's pristine water source, disguised as a legitimate agricultural development. The evidence was irrefutable: photographs, financial ledgers, recorded conversations, and damning geological surveys. Jedediah, in his quiet, methodical way, had spent his final months gathering the proof, knowing that only irrefutable facts could expose the powerful corporation behind it all. Thunder's persistent vigil at the coffin, its silent protest, was now revealed as a final, desperate plea for justice, a symbolic guide leading them directly to the truth Jedediah had died to protect. It was a testament to their extraordinary bond, a communication beyond words, a trust that transcended even death. The revelations sent shockwaves through Bandera. The carefully constructed facade of the corporate entity crumbled overnight under the weight of Jedediah's posthumous evidence. Public outrage was swift and fierce. Local officials, some of whom had been complicit or simply negligent, faced intense scrutiny and resignations. The antagonist, a powerful land development company, was met with public exposure, massive lawsuits, and severe legal repercussions. Their reputation irrevocably shattered. The community, initially reeling from the betrayal, slowly began to grasp the true extent of Jedediah's sacrifice. His old-fashioned ways, once dismissed as stubbornness, were now understood as profound wisdom, a deep-seated commitment to the land and its people that ran deeper than anyone had realized. Shame mingled with immense gratitude as they recognized the quiet hero who had saved their beloved home from an unseen threat. For the family, the truth brought a profound sense of emotional closure. There was no need for revenge. Jedediah's actions had already delivered the ultimate justice. They reconciled with their past misunderstandings, the times they had dismissed his concerns or questioned his withdrawn nature. A wave of immense pride washed over them, replacing the lingering confusion and sorrow. Jedediah's memory was transformed from that of a quiet, somewhat eccentric cowboy into a revered local hero, a guardian of Bandera's spirit. a legend whispered around campfires and honored in town halls. His legacy was not just the land he preserved, but the courage he embodied, a silent testament to the power of one man's unwavering conviction. The future of Bandera was secured, its pristine landscape protected, its values reaffirmed by Jedediah's selfless sacrifice. The town, once teetering on the edge of irreversible change, now stood firm, its cowboy spirit renewed and strengthened. Thunder, finally at peace, continued to roam the now protected lands, a living reminder of the bond between man and beast, and the truth that would not be silenced. His mournful whinnies at the funeral had been a final, desperate communication, a message from beyond the grave. Jedediah, even in death, had found a way to speak, to protect, to save. His spirit, like the wind across the Texas plains, would forever whisper through the oaks,